All right, so today we're going to talk about isosceles and equilateral triangles and some of the theorems that are important to them. So an isosceles triangle is a triangle with two congruent sides. Okay, so we've got A and B congruent to AC here. Now, in an isosceles triangle, the side that's not congruent we call the base. Okay, and then these are the legs, the sides that are congruent. This is a base angle. This is also a base angle. And then angle A is the vertex angle. And that's the angle between the two legs. It's important that you know those because we're going to talk about them in theorems. So we have what we call the base angle theorem, and it says if two sides of a triangle are congruent, then the angles opposite those are congruent. So what I tend to do is I tend to take this congruent symbol and draw an arrow, so that tells me what angles are opposite the sides. So in this case, if AB, side AB is congruent to side AC, then angle C, side opposite AB, is congruent to angle B, is all that is saying. Remember, converses, we take the premise and the conclusion and we switch them. Okay, so now we're saying that if A is congruent to B, and I'm going to use those as base angles this time. So I don't want you to think that a base necessarily means it's sitting on it or the orientation of the triangle has something to do with it. So basically, if angle A is congruent to angle C or B, then the sides opposite are congruent. So opposite A is BC, and opposite B is AC. So side BC is congruent to side AC. So that's the converse. We just switch them around. All right, so let's find the measures of angle X and angle Z. Now I've got an isosceles triangle. Those are opposite each other, so I know that they're congruent. Okay. So I know that there's 180 degrees in a circle, and I've already got 50 of it taken up. So I know that there are 30 degrees left, 130 degrees left. But I've got these two angles, so the measure of angle X plus the measure of angle Z equals 130, and they're the same. So I'm just going to divide by 2 now, so that the measure of angle X, which is equal to the measure of angle Z, and that equals half of 130, which is 65. Okay. So the corollary to the base angle theorem says that if a triangular is equiangular, that means that all angles are congruent. Then it is equilateral, which is all sides congruent. And vice versa. Okay. So let's find the values for X and Y. So I know that this is an equiangular triangle. All my sides are congruent, so I know that X is 7. I also know that this side is going to be 7. And then this triangle, I've got my base angles congruent, so that means that these sides are congruent. So Y plus 4 equals 7. And if I subtract 4, y equals 3. All right, in this example, we know that these two angles are congruent because of the congruent sides, the base angle theorem. If this one's 50, that means that there's 130 degrees left, and dividing that by 2, each of these angles is 65 degrees. So if I go to solve that, 2y plus 64 equals 65. If I subtract 64 from both sides, I get 2y equals 1. If I divide by 2, y equals 1/2. Okay. If this angle is 65, that means that this angle right here is going to be 180 because it lies on a line, minus 65, or 115. Okay. To find x, we know again that this angle and this angle are congruent, but not to the other two, just to themselves. So we know that there is 65 degrees left in that triangle. So 45 minus x over 4 is equal to half of 65. Okay. Because if there's 65 degrees left, each of these angles here are going to be half of 65. So now if I go to solve this, half of 65 is 32.5. So I get 45 minus x over 4 equals 32.5. If I subtract 45 from both sides, I'm going to get negative x over 4 equals negative 12.5. And then if I multiply both sides by negative 4, x will be 50 degrees. So I've got y equal to 1/2 and x equal to 50. Now, if I want to find the perimeter of this triangle, it's an equiangular triangle, which means all of the sides are the same. So I'm just going to take the easiest side that I think is, I could take any two sides and set them equal to each other. So x plus 13 equals 2x plus 4. So 13, if I subtract x from both sides, equals x plus 4. And then if I subtract 4, 9 equals x. So if x is 9, then each side would be 9 plus 13, or 22. So if each side is 22 and there's 3 sides, 3 times 22 is 66. So my perimeter is 66 centimeters. Okay. So we went over a lot of theorems about isosceles triangles and equilateral triangles. Have a math-tastic day.